This way. Is that Prince for King? What's today's mathematics?
Truth is universal. Truth cannot be invented.
Then it was guaranteed that Marcus Garvey would come the next night. And the hall was packed with people. And everybody went with ammunition.
How they understand themselves as African, right, and American.
Yes.
Like, it's not either or, right?
Everybody who knows anything about Israel knows that in order to effectuate significant change, you not only need a majority, you need a Jewish majority.
America awards her killers, and they get ribbons and stripes and bars.
A U.S. State Department sponsored program and set of musical tours called the Jazz Ambassadors.
Talks about the work of Marcus Garvey and the work of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as being demonstrative of, and he basically called them total nationalists.
But the reality is that African people are not vicious, violent people.
He's not teaching hate, he's teaching history.
Welcome to another episode of Wild as a Dome TV. Today I have a special guest. You've seen him on the channel a lot now. He's one of our regular guests, and we have a lot to talk about. As you know, there has been a lot going on in the world. And so hopefully, we can have a conversation that you guys take something from and learn from. And so, Brother Sudip, thank you for coming again to Wild as a Dome.
Thank you so much, Rakeem, for having me again.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Was reading your Substack. There is no socialism without the end of U.S. empire. I would like for you to kind of talk to the audience about that concept, and also, are there groups on the left that are saying it is you can have a socialism without the end of U.S. empire?
Yeah, no. So again, that article is on my Substack, but it depends on which I shared, but it's originally on Socialist Forum, which is the Democratic Socialists of America, one of our main journals. And just for transparency's sake, I am one of the editors. I'm on the editorial board for the National DSA. Yeah, your question is interesting only because it's hard to even figure out exactly what positions people hold these days, organizations hold, other than a few that are really excellent. So first, I want to give a shout out to the groups that are actually very, very strong on anti-imperialism, especially anti-US imperialism, which is Black Alliance for Peace. They have chapters beyond just the United States, which is something still lacking for other groups, including the DSA, even though I'm part of it. And the DSA, there's elements within the DSA that are anti-imperialist or trying to grow the overall national that way. But yeah, so I think there are maybe debates, not necessarily on not caring about these issues, but I think I don't want to name anyone particularly, but I've been in debates with people I'd still respect who argue that focusing on U.S. empire, although credible, is something that should maybe not be the immediate thing, if that makes sense. Some have argued things like, well, people don't care as much about international issues, or others kind of in the past have sort of organized themselves, in a way where very short-term domestic issues is the way to go. And it's also part of the DSA's own relationship to this. So even though I'm part of the org, I have a lot of criticisms of its own history. So the DSA, if people don't know, officially formed, I believe, in the late 70s, early 80s, and it was an alliance between two other orgs that preceded it. One of its main founders was Barbara Ehrenreich, who was pretty solid. She's white, and the other co-founder is also white, but she was pretty solid on anti-imperialism. She passed away, I think, just a couple of years ago. She's a famous writer who wrote I think, nickel and dimed, which was her own first person perspective on working minimum wage jobs.
Mm.
But the other person maybe you've heard is Michael Harrington.
Hmm.
And that was the main one, the main person who I think the name is associated with the DSA for various reasons. He, prior to even forming the DSA, he had been a quote unquote democratic socialist, which we can get into to what even that means. But he had been, for example, pretty supportive of the war in Vietnam
Wow.
because he viewed it as a quote unquote, well, not necessarily a good war, but he didn't quite agree with the Vietnamese statist approach, which again is another issue I have with that sort of spectrum of politics. Is like, what's worse, American bombs killing everyone, or a government that might be, I don't think is that flawed, but might end up being flawed, but nonetheless is not killing scores and scores of people.
Right.
But part of his thinking eventually was also, we need to make alliances within the Democratic Party, and that means sometimes shoving away these bigger concerns about international issues because that might rankle some of the Democratic leadership too. Because on these issues of foreign policy, usually Republican and Democrat are quite, like this, like
Yes.
together, right?
Mhm.
So those are the kind of debates that this article was kind of entering with, and also, of course, debates around Palestine. So again, DSA has passed an anti-Zionist resolution, so it's taken that next step. But there are still, I think, debates within the group that have to do with how do we prioritize Palestine, and in some cases, some people think of Palestine as just a moral issue. I think it is a moral issue. Like I've said in the previous chat we had, it is completely the mass slaughter that's happened on our buck has basically deformed and defaced humanity for generations. Just like chattel slavery had done and other forms of colonialism. This is something that's going to live with us even as we win. Eventually, we will have to live with for a long time. But it's also strategic, and that's what I've got into the article. It's not just you're doing the right thing by standing up for Palestinians, which should be important. You're also doing the smart thing if you really care about socialism, like real socialism, not just welfare, even though I support that, but not just like regulated capitalism with some welfare. If you really care about owning the industries, focusing on Palestine and these other issues really are a major concern.
Absolutely. In the article, you begin by talking about Malcolm. And as we know, in the last year of Malcolm's life, he went to Africa, different places within the so-called Middle East. And he began to speak with leaders and revolutionaries all over the continent. And he was able to, not that he just gained that understanding there, but I think it crystallized his understanding when, hey, the same enemy that's being fought here is the ones who African Americans have been fighting since they've been brought over here, right? And so his view of liberation became an international one. Whenever we talk about, or especially in your article, when you talk about socialism in the United States is inseparable from dismantling U.S. empire. Um, why do you see it that way? I mean, I think I know, right? But just for others just again, there are people that watch the show. There are people that come to these spaces from all various backgrounds. Some people are new to this. Some people are very seasoned, right? And so I like to be able to appeal to everyone. And so if you can just talk about why the fight for socialism in the United States is inseparable from dismantling U.S. empire, especially with what we see in Venezuela, Iran, and we're going to get into some of that.
Yes,
But,
yes.
yeah.
No. I think for me too, I enter these discussions not necessarily like for me, obviously, when I write, I understand I'm not really writing for a ton of conservative people, and I'm not writing for a ton of conservative whites, obviously. So there's certain people that I just don't really see as important when it comes to my arguments. But like you said, I am writing for even the person who might be not necessarily confused for themselves, but might not be entirely sure of how to explain what they're thinking, right? So I completely agree. That's another part of the audience that we still need to tap because there's a lot of good people out there who care.
Yes.
but they might be at a loss at the dinner table sometimes with not their, Fox News uncle or anything, but their MSNBC
Yeah.
family member who might
Yes.
be saying, well, as you can see, Trump is the worst, which is true. Trump is doing, when we'll talk about it, Trump is escalating in ways that are just really scary, frankly, but also at the same time, it's not just him.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
It's really not. He has a whole industry, a network of people. And in some cases, of course, again, Democrats who are not leading Democrats, at least, because there are some Democrats who've been technically against what he did with kidnapping Maduro. But there's also a fair bit of complicity
Yes.
on both sides, right? So we'll talk about that. But I'm glad you asked. So there's a couple of reasons I state in the article. One, and these are again strategic reasons, which I think is very important. Morally, we should be against the mass slaughter of people. I hope we can all agree, regardless of where we're coming from. But in terms of strategy, a couple of reasons. So the U.S. empire is not just about. I mean, it's about white interests for sure, but it's also about capitalist interests. So the empire is synonymous with capitalism. That's one way of looking at it.
Right.
So when the empire expands, like for example, since the fall of the Berlin Wall, it's been able to lead more coups into certain areas or have color revolutions, which we'll talk about sort of in Iran, sort of. Like you have these, mini revolutions within these countries, like in Eastern Europe with the fall of communism that supposedly said democracy, but ended up becoming mostly private enterprise coming in. Not the same way as America. I think the United States, we're very unique in how awful capitalism is. Like, I think even other places, they're like, no, we just want a little bit of a welfare state. But nonetheless, these are spaces where major companies, US-based, Japanese-based, Western Europe-based, or even part of some other alliances, like the oil companies, they can get into more spaces. So the more coups, the more interventions that knock down even more reformist governments, because one of the first coups that the US CIA had done was in Guatemala, right, in the early 50s. And that government, even though Jacob Arbenz was himself sympathetic to Marxists in his government, in his country, he wasn't suppressing them, so that's to his credit. But he didn't treat them as immediate allies. He was actually he actually got his influence from FDR.
Wow.
I'm just setting it up as like explaining how he was fairly moderate and he was knocked down. And then what comes after that is the major agricultural companies can come in and eat up more of the agricultural space and they can grow their power. So the number one thing is US power is about capital. And as soon as US empire gets a foothold in more spaces, it allows these companies to come in and they grow more powerful. And then they can take that same energy here. So like the oil industry in Venezuela, although it's very complicated as to how Trump is actually moving with it, because clearly some of the companies, not because they care, but they feel a little bit, they like to do their business in the dark, in the shadows. They don't want to be out here with the conferences that Trump is holding at White House. So he's kind of forcing their hand. But nonetheless, these companies will be involved in Venezuela if the revolution doesn't stand up. And I think they will. But let's just say they do succeed. These same oil industries who already give a lot of money to politicians here will just have more profits to spread to the politicians here. So that's the number one thing, is that the empire creates capital and global capital will find ways to grow its strength and double back to like funneling money. And in some cases, alliances, like, networks of people who are, oh, I think you froze for a sec. Did you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you.
Okay, perfect. So they can obviously funnel back more money for lobbyists, but they can also funnel money into think tanks that inevitably will go against groups that are even moderately socialist or model social democrat. So that's the number one thing. The number two thing is there are just big international issues that can't be solved without capitalism getting out of the way.
Right.
And that means empire, which is like the number one being global warming, climate change, right?
Yes.
Already it's affecting parts of Africa. Already it's affecting parts of Asia, parts of the US. These companies, these oil industries, again, that grow stronger as they see America knocking down or hope or willing to knock down certain countries like Maduro's regime or Maduro's government, rather. These companies will never really do enough, because what is needed is for them to go away and to be, to be publicly owned, but then to be actually reoriented for public consumption, not just like willy-nilly profit, they'll never go away.
Mm-hmm.
And so these issues, these international issues, have to be accomplished through getting rid of the protector of these interests.
Yes.
And then third is the American capitalism, American empire creates networks of pretty scumbag networks, right? So this goes from like, I think I got the what's it called? Oh, the Church Committee report.
Mm-hmm.
If people remember, Senator, I forgot his full name, Frank Church, in this late 60s, I believe, or early 70s, the Congress back then was actually fairly more critical of foreign policy interventions by then because of Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So Frank Church led a investigation into the CIA.
Mm.
And I think they just I just bought it, like a abridged version. I think the longer version is like 800 pages.
Mm-hmm.
But in that, you can see all the things they did in supporting scumbags. Like they supported the mob here, abroad, in Italy. They supported the mob in Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
They were willing to work with Cuban of course, ex-Gusan, well, not Gusanos currently, but people who have mob ties.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they've supported some religious groups even across the world just for the sake of fighting communism. And now currently we see, like, we once were the global policemen, literally, training people in the Philippines on how to suppress their movements. But now it's come back to us. Like Israel, I think I've mentioned, Israel's own police force have come to the United States at times to train our forces. So these are the three main reasons I can put it in a nutshell.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. One interesting article that I read was Halliburton, who many know from Dick Cheney being the former CEO, and then the war in Iraq, and how they benefited from quote unquote that regime change. That Halliburton is now suing Venezuela for $300 million in lost profits from when Chavez nationalized the oil. Kellogg is another company that is suing Venezuela for lost profits, and I think they're going through some shady like World Bank court or whatever. But but it kind of just shows you, when we think about America and its power, right? Whenever you can do this, what does national sovereignty really mean, right? Because if I can't stop you from coming in, kidnapping my, leader, setting up U.S. corporate interests to pillage all of the resources in the ground, it says a lot for what we consider, actual sovereignty and what it means to be a sovereign nation. It's very interesting, man. And I heard one person say that, like, nations that do business with the American dollar end up being nothing more than vassal states, right? And
yes,
that was a very interesting idea to think. When we look at these companies, and you kind of, mentioned climate change, and we're looking at, just whole entire ecosystems die, right? And people and like, lumber industries and all types of industries just murdering the rainforest. When it comes to capitalism and capitalist interest, I know it's somewhat of a rhetorical question, but do these capitalists do not realize that without an earth to live on, there is no money to make for them, right? Like it's
right.
But there was I can't remember, but I think there was like a old, like not sure which indigenous nation, but there was a proverb that they had that spoke about the white man in those type of terms. But whenever you think about that type of pathology that is willing to destroy the planet that you live on, there's not another one that we can go to, despite what Elon Musk says, right? There's not another one that we can go to that, despite the damage that they are causing to the planet, making money profits over profits over profits are more important. Like, what do you think about that?
Listen, I no, I kind of enjoy talking about this only because it adds another dimension to more of the like I'm a Marxist Leninist, so things for me are materialist on a purposeful level because
Hmm.
entering a certain conversation on the psychological level, I just think is always the wrong way to go when it's
Right,
the first level.
right.
But to be honest, I'm a bit curious like you are. There
Hmm.
are moments where I'm just reading a report or like you said, hearing about certain practices and thinking, this is gonna mess you up too. Like I don't quite even if you think about so when when the New Deal happened, there were some good things that happened in it. It was still a project that some like there were divisions within capitalists back then. There was obviously a core group who were what we would call the extreme libertarian, and also that's meaningless because libertarianism to them just means wanting black people in the South to work for nothing and indigenous, you know what I mean? Like all that's stupid. Like all
Right.
that's just white supremacy. Like I worked hard. It's like you didn't do anything. Even I mean to be honest, Barry Goldwater, he grew up really rich, the libertarian
Hmm.
godfather himself. Like he grew up with, I think, a nanny and a whole house. So, God bless him or whatever, but may he enjoy his time below. But the thing is, he, but the thing is, back then, even though there was a core group that were almost cooing FDR, who was not a radical,
Hmm.
that's the other interesting thing. He was not a radical, yet some basic humanity was radical to them. There was a considerable number of capitalists who were like, we're down to do this with you, this New Deal regulation, because this is going to save what is ultimately the thing that is bad about capitalism. Inequality is not, for me, the main problem. I mean, it is one of the problems. The problem with capitalism is that the housing industry, the healthcare, food and entertainment is presupposed to be the space where private industry should thrive. It's in
Mm.
the hands of privately owned people where you and I don't have the immediate right to deal with unless we unionize. And even that can be quite hard and it doesn't promise everything.
Right.
That's my issue with capitalism. That's why I'm a Marxist Leninist and, part of the Walter Rodney tradition. Like, that's the issue.
Hmm.
But so with capitalists back in the day, they understood how, um, oh, sorry, I'm getting like a
No, go ahead. Go
little
ahead.
bit of
No.
a, no, I'm getting a little bit of a spasm. But
Oh,
so I have a health problem where I get
that's
like
all right.
cramps in my legs, but it's fine.
Okay.
So it's and also that's another thing to be very transparent about disability justice and things we could talk about another time.
Hmm.
But but now that's kind of gone. So the capitalist class at the time, some of them were quite reflective to what you're describing. Like we kind of just need that.
Hmm. Right.
Right. As
Right.
long as we get the control of the housing industry being private, as long as we have the healthcare industry being private, we're cool with some taxes. Of course, they started to get annoyed when their profit margins weren't the same by the late 60s, right? There were certain things in capitalism that hit a ceiling,
Hmm.
but there was a time before then they were quite, I don't want to say sensible, but they were making the same kind of rationales as you would. Like, how would we survive? Because for them, it was revolution.
Right.
Communism was around the corner, and there was a real chance for things to really happen here, too. Now, I don't know. I think it's part of a couple of things. Doug Henwood, he wrote a really interesting article a few years ago in The Jacobin, where he talked about how leadership, even if it was like, he was never like giving credit to the leadership of America, but how leadership has kind of also gone down the drain. Like Elon Musk, if you compare him to, again, this is very dangerous territory because I don't want to give this feeling like there was a good kind of capitalist. But to be honest, he's not as smart when it comes to even hiding his cards. Like Andrew
Hmm.
Carnegie, he would hire black laborers who had just migrated, I think, from the South,
Hmm.
right? He would hire them on purpose as scab breakers because they were also not allowed to join the white-led unions.
Yeah, absolutely. Hmm.
Right. So he was smart enough. He was not caring about black people. He was smart enough to be like, this is a group of people who are desperate,
It was a
who are
more
essentially,
strategic play, whereas today things just
yes.
seem to be
Well, he just
power
retweets
and
white
force.
nationalist stuff. He
Right.
retweets white nationalist talking points. I mean, I
Yeah.
know Kennedy was a racist,
Hmm.
but I actually think he would be smart enough to be like, no, I like black people. I like
To hide
brown.
his
I like,
racism,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
He'd maybe bring some of us to his little like, golf course and be like, I like you guys. You guys got
Mhm.
it going on. You're the good guys. Or in
Well,
something
there's all
weird.
types of books and essays about
Right.
uh, white billionaires and white racist billionaires and philanthropy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, in order to achieve a certain agenda, they would be a
Right.
lot more
Yes.
covert about it.
Mm-hmm.
When today it's power and force, right? Like you mentioned, I've
Mm-hmm.
I've seen Elon Musk retweet apartheid South African propaganda, and it's like, or the great replacement theory propaganda
Yes.
that he had, and
Yes.
it's like, wow, like he seems to be really stuck on that, right?
Well, he's also he's just following in his father's footsteps, I guess,
Yeah,
because his
yeah.
father, literally that side of the family moved from Canada to South Africa,
Hmm.
right? Because Canada was not racist enough at that time, so they moved to South Africa. They got the real stuff, I guess, the real
I'm in
essence
heaven
of.
now, right?
Right, exactly. And he was a
Like,
liberal, he kept saying. He was a liberal at a certain time. But, you can never trust these white people's stories because they just say whatever fits. But
mhm.
I think Musk was a liberal. And that's the other thing about, the duplicity of all parties involved. Like Silicon Valley was initially seen as like the new constituency for Democrats,
Yeah, right, right. At one time it
right?
was. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely
Right.
right.
And they were doing that because they were also, it's like a twin thing that we're talking about. They did that, and also in the process of doing that, they also positioned themselves as like more compassionate capitalists.
Hmm.
Right? That was the thing. Like Zuckerberg, before he got into this whole manosphere thing with doing like taekwondo or something,
Yeah,
and
right.
Rogan and everything, he
Hmm.
was actually quite like quote unquote liberal-ish in talking points. Like they would make statements about, I don't know if Black Lives Matter, but they would make statements about racial inequality and use certain terms. But
Hmm.
all that's out the window. And I think
Right.
that speaks to a couple of psychological things, for honest. Like again, that's why I'm always like a little bit fascinated because it is a question where I'm just like, like for someone like Musk, you sit down and you do have to quote unquote make a calculation. And if the calculation is, oh, we're gonna destroy the world, how am I gonna be rich? But also, I think it speaks to again the people we're seeing now as capitalists are more unhinged than ever in the
Yeah.
modern world.
Yeah.
And this also speaks to the global stage. The USSR, despite all its flaws, was a check
Hmm.
on certain feelings that maybe a person would have in a state of. I think this is what happens to capitalists who grow in the shadow, where the USSR or a major socialist power is not really existent. I know China is, but China moves, not a huge critic of them, but China moves in a different way.
Yes.
Both for their own benefit. So they survived Tiananmen Square. They survived their own, like, I'm sure the US kind of sort of pseudo intervention that way. But the USSR was putting a lot of money in their budget to
Hmm.
support various movements, sometimes to their own detriment, but
Hmm.
nonetheless they were doing so. And I think with that being gone, like Musk grew up in a world where that's not an impetus. Nobody he's involving himself with also have that sort of danger looming. Like that was a big deal for a long time. The Soviet Union itself for 70 plus years was not meant to just go away, and it did.
Right. And I think one thing, like how you mentioned Silicon Valley a lot of times, like in their beginning stages, they, you know, I guess use a lot of liberal talking points that may have confused
Hmm.
a lot of people. I would just like to invoke Malcolm here for people
Mm.
who may ever be confused. Whenever Malcolm said, "You show me a capitalist, and I'll show you a bloodsucker," right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
regardless to whether they consider themselves Republican, Democrat, or whatever, at the end of the
right.
day, there's an internal contradiction between the billionaire class and the working class, and their
Yes.
aims and goals will never be yours. You know
No,
what I'm
no,
saying? So they
no.
can talk all of that nice, fluffy shit if they
Right.
want, right?
Right, right,
But at
right.
the end of the day, uh, they are about gaining more wealth and power,
You're right.
regardless to where we are. Now, some may be for a few more social reforms
Yeah.
than the other, but they're definitely not for any type of balance of power and redistribution of the wealth. Um, and so, when we talk about capitalism, imperialism, the how we just spoke about Venezuela, and we see, American industries already chomping at the bit to get
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah.
Um, and it's when we talk about that, right? Like, can you talk about just more of how these capitalists that we see, that they that in a lot of ways people idolize in America, right? Like
Hmm.
that they're not amassing their wealth in some benign way, right? Like this
Right,
idea
right.
of an ethical billionaire is something that Americans seem to like hold on to. Like, can you talk about that some?
Yeah, I think again it speaks, and just want to say, and we can talk more about Malcolm X too. Like I think one earlier point you made, I just wanted to add to, yeah,
Hmm.
he was always an internationalist, right?
Hmm.
He was from the beginning, even when he was just starting to speak from from the NOI perspective, he was always viscerally, talking about things like DMB and Fu, right?
Right.
Like that's, so again, he was, it just goes to show you can come from any background, you know, as he did from being incarcerated for a little bit and to become a person who sees not just how things are, but also how things could be. Like he was quite brilliant that way. So again, just,
Hmm.
just
Yeah,
lifting him up
he's
because
one
he's,
of my favorites of all time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because also how he condenses things and just like, because if you read some of these speeches, I assign these speeches to my students and I reread them. And
Hmm.
like in a paragraph or two, he gives you history, he gives you
Hmm.
contemporary political perspective, and then he gives you a little bit of like a joke.
Right,
It's
right, right,
it's
right,
kind of
right.
funny. Like, yeah. So I just want to raise that because
Yeah,
he was just a
yeah.
very charismatic and also brilliant human being.
Hmm.
So but yeah, to your question about these capitalists who are chomping at the bit and how they actually amass their wealth. I mean, so with Venezuela, so there's a couple of things I really want to discuss and hear what you think too. Like, because also, first of all, with Venezuela, it is very wild what's going on. Like, we have kidnapped leaders before,
Hmm.
for many and not I shouldn't say we because we're not involved. This is
Right, yeah, yeah,
this is
right,
the
right, right.
capitalist and white supremacist. We should be careful there.
Yeah.
But our the government that claims to represent us and this institution that claim to represent us of private power, like in the U.S. expansion into Philippines in 1898, the Filipinos who fought the Spanish didn't stop fighting the U.S.
Hmm.
Aguinaldo, he was the leader of the Filipino resistance. I think he had been kidnapped also.
Hmm.
And then subsequently, I think imprisoned or murdered, but he had been kidnapped from a meeting, I think.
Right.
Or not from a meeting, but something happened to him where it was very clear he was just, I mean, that's his land. So he was quote unquote captured in same language, captured in the Philippines, like as
Right.
if he was trespassing in his own land. So, and we've done that with Manuel Noriega. The
Hmm.
only reasons why I
It's
also
kind of like
don't
the
like,
same playbook with Noriega and
yeah,
Maduro.
yeah, the only difference I would like to say is to give some credit to Maduro because to me it's more shameless because Noriega was the United States right-hand man.
Right.
And he was like in some ways getting a bit of what he gave out.
Hmm.
Maduro is a good guy.
Hmm.
Like I do want to
Well,
also raise
but
that. Like he
what
was
about all of the people that you see that are kind of fence straddling, like in
mm-hmm.
media, where they're saying Maduro was a bad guy, but
Yeah, yeah.
we shouldn't have done that. What do you like? What are your
Oh,
thoughts?
I think it's I don't know. I know this goes on YouTube, but I think it's fucked up. Like I think
Yeah.
it's like, I think it's really I think it's just then don't say anything.
Hmm.
I saw Bernie look, I will always have a stupid part of me that's like, oh, thanks for Bernie for saying a couple of things for a union or two, because I've had that experience. But his recent statement, which I did cite in my Substack, he had a statement about Maduro. I think he didn't even say, oh, he's flawed, as some say, which is also annoying because anything you say about this man, you're just contributing to the narrative about him.
Hmm.
So can
Hmm.
you just shut up? Like that's the
Yeah.
other thing. Like can you just shut up for a little bit and don't have to do it's like it's not worth you're not helping him. And also I want to add his wife, who is the first lady of that country and herself a legislator, like a long time, I think, speaker of their house. Like it's two leaders,
Hmm.
and and again, I think Black Liberation Media cited some reports. I listened to their morning show and they said like she came into one of the court court hearings or whatever you want to call it, one of these, kangaroo courts, with injuries, clearly injuries. So it's like, can you shut up? Because this woman is also being abducted. But so Bernie Sanders not only said he was flawed, he went further than that. He said he's a corrupt and brutal dictator. And I made the point, not responding to him, but just saying it to people I know and to people who read my writing. Again, contextually, shut up, because right now this man is kidnapped with his wife.
Right.
So that's the first thing. Secondarily, I'm sorry, did you check our leaders anytime, soon? Like the Epstein report dropped just, I think, a week before the kidnapping. So for people out there who straddle the fence, or in my view, do more than straddle, which is pick a side, regardless of how you may say this is a bad, what's the word, abuse of power. Once you open that door of saying Maduro is bad, even my personal view, you are condemning him and his wife to being here for indefinite period of time. And not just that, you are again setting up for a further invasion of that country. And furthermore, you are once again being complicit in the whitewashing of our own regime that is highly dictatorial, right? So I think it's fucked up, and I think it's one of the most messed up things. Who needs a right wing in the US when sometimes you have a liberal to left wing that is very, very like willing. Like, can you imagine if you're a foreign leader of another country? And I want to add, you're not a Noriega, you're a socialist leader or a populist leader who did some good. Like, I want to raise that. He did good. You're kidnapped in the dead of night in your pajamas. You're on a helicopter with these crazy ass Marine guys who are probably hopped, like Fort Bragg cartel. They talk about it, like probably hopped up on drugs. Yeah, probably like ready to, like, they're snarling at you, and you're just sitting there like, oh, I guess, and he's a brave man with his wife. Like, he gives the thumbs up, so he's cool. But imagine you and I say we're in a different, like, context and we're kidnapped, and then we hear from the left wing of that country, oh, you're brutal. Rakim is, as much as I like Rakim, or not even saying that, he is a corrupt, and you read that somehow from your lawyer. It's like, wait, I can you talk to your lawyer, be like, wait, can you, like, tell me which side this came from? Like, I can't guess.
I can't say exactly.
Yeah, I can't guess. Like, was that who's Bernie Sanders? Like, and there's like Sudip was like, yeah, maybe he didn't do drugs and didn't chase drugs, but he is messed up. It's like, I don't need this.
Right.
Then shut up. Because you know what Maduro said at the court, which is exactly what everyone should say for him. I am a prisoner of war.
Absolutely. But again, I kind of wanted to ask you about, when Rubio mentioned Cuba.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
And then we see what's happening in Iran, and we'll get there in a second. But I think it can also be, a lot is made of it, right? But domestically, people are going through hell. People are not being able to pay their bills. People are not being able to eat. Somebody was I guess, like, trying to debate me or something about something stupid. And, I had brought up, these statistics showing that like 47 million people in America were, hungry. And that was just like unfathomable for them to believe, like, in America, right? And so do you think, like, the aggressive nature of this administration, it's not that they're necessarily doing anything different than previous administrations, especially whenever you talk to marginalized groups, they'll tell you, hey, it's the same old capitalism and same old white supremacy as always. But this administration is extremely aggressive, and they're, as you mentioned, like Elon Musk, they're saying the quiet part out loud now, right?
Right.
Do you think that leads to, radicalizing more people at home, or do, like, the pulse of the people that you've spoken to, are they feeling like a helplessness? Are they feeling like, are they becoming more radicalized? Like, what do you see happening here?
I think from what I've heard from people and what I understand from conversations with people who are also on the ground organizing, it's a mix of everything. I think if you look at, so I wrote really quickly about the Rubio thing, because also I think what Trump is doing is also very traditional coalitional politics. Because again, people forget it's not just like, I mean, Trump does act like a king and he does act like a buffoon. So it's not surprising to just see him as the end all be all of his regime. But
Right.
he has a lot of people around him he's trying to appease. He
Mm-hmm.
has the white evangelicals,
Mm-hmm.
hence why he's so intense about so-called, saving sports from,
Oh yeah.
trans girls and stuff. Like they've done those kind of things. And then there's also, a lot of the Homeland Security Twitter page, they now retweet a lot of like things about Jesus, especially, and so religious avocations from the to the white Protestant evangelical faith are
Mm-hmm.
pretty on the nose. That's for one part of his coalition. Marco Rubio is the other part, is the neocon coalition. He's not Trump is not a neocon. Trump is just a businessman who wants to make a ton of money. And I think he didn't really want to win presidency the first time, but he got into it, and then
I agree.
yeah,
I
he just
agree.
bumbled and stumbled his way. He basically just wanted to humiliate the black guy, which was
Yeah.
Barack Obama, and be like, "I'm white. How dare you make fun of me?" And to be honest, I don't like Barack Obama, but to his credit, I always enjoyed the fact that he used to be like taking him down very easily. But
Yeah.
also Barack Obama, which speaks to his affectation and his politics, he never saw the road as it is. Like I think for some of us, people of color, black or brown, we would have sensed out a Trump and been like, you should never be friends with that guy or
Yeah.
take him as a joke. Because eventually Obama, I think, did that, and that also played into like he didn't quite understand just how much this one white guy's hatred of him animated him because he
Mm-hmm.
was obsessed with him from the birth record stuff. So I do want to say that he is, but at the end of the day, Trump has coalitional partners. So the Rubio thing is interesting because there's also this dynamic of like, I wonder how much of it is like also Rubio just telling Trump you're going to win over certain Latino voters. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's something he's thinking, which is
Yeah.
also not wholly incorrect.
Yeah.
But it's mostly Gusanos in Cuba and now
Yeah.
some Venezuelans. So I wonder how much of that is Rubio feeding him this stuff because Rubio himself has this
Good point.
obsession
Yeah.
over Cuba. And I also want to add his father. This is also interesting the thing about narrative.
Mm-hmm.
His father, the whole story is like his father fled Cuba. But even in the New York Times articles that talk about Rubio, they do admit his father fled pre-communist Cuba. They say it. So it's so
I
interesting.
read that. I read
Yeah,
that
yeah.
last week.
Yeah. I've heard about that before, but it was just
Yeah.
funny to see it now more in print because it's like, are they just so there's a lot of factors here, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of like, different kind of things that Trump is trying to maneuver and control.
Mm-hmm.
Now to your and also really quickly, sorry,
There
Mexico.
you
This
go.
is from the Black Liberation Media morning show. I want to give credit I think they said that Mexico was so Trump had said no more oil for you from Venezuela to Cuba, and then they also told Mexico not to do it. But Mexico under Claudia Sheinbaum, who is this
Mm-hmm.
Jewish anti-Zionist Marxist professor who is awesome, she went ahead and still. I just want to say she still
So
is
can I
giving
ask you
oil to
about Sean
Cuba.
Baum? Because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know as admittedly I don't know as much about her as I should, right? But is she really a Marxist or is that just
Oh,
something?
I just know she's a I think what I understand I do think she's a Marxist.
Hmm.
Now, how that actually plays out in politics,
Yeah.
I don't know everything. All I know is that she has done a few things in terms of creating more publicly available spaces
Hmm.
within large cities as well, because they've done some community center work too in
Yeah.
Mexico City. And if you look at the living standards in Mexico, it's gone up, not just under
Hmm.
the guy who said vote for her, AMLO. So that's some of it. She's more of a left-wing populist for
Hmm.
sure. But in terms of Cuba, to me, that's a Marxist thing. Like,
Yeah.
again, she's more Marxist than freaking Bernie Sanders for sure.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
actually saying
Yeah.
to the United States, which is always, saying we're going to invade you and
Hmm.
have technically before
Hmm.
to fight the cartels. She's basically said, oh, I heard your story, but I'm still going to send the oil to Cuba.
Yeah.
So I want to lift that up because I want viewers to know it's not just some countries are like, I don't take you seriously.
Hmm.
But to the point of like how people feel, I think from what I've heard, it's a mixed bag. I think there is obviously a lot of people who feel very apathetic, or not apathetic, very nihilistic because of what you mentioned in terms of living standards. Healthcare, for instance, is the number one thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Healthcare premiums are going up and up.
Hmm.
I personally I know people who have horrible experiences with their insurance companies, and all they basically do all day is having to call each insurance company for their really life-saving medicine, and then they get a bill for something that they shouldn't have gotten a bill, and then
Right.
it's ongoing for a whole year. And it can create a quite debilitating mindset because you just feel like, how can you go on if you're just constantly this whole threat of a bill looming over you? That is
Mhm.
for a lot of Americans. So I
Yeah.
think that's one, I think the main thing that people have to think about as communists, as socialists, is not so much as people being brainwashed, they're being overwhelmed by the day to day.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
how can you afford to organize if you can't literally afford your life-saving drug?
Right.
You know, I think that's
Or
the
to
main thing
eat,
that's
or
happening.
to, or
To
like
eat,
gas,
yes.
like basic things, right? And speaking of Sheinbaum, I do have a quote from her. She sent Cuba 85,000 barrels of crude oil,
Mm.
and she told Trump pretty much, you don't tell me who I sell my oil."
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, another quote. The oil belongs to the Mexicans and is for the Mexicans. Neither the United States nor any other country has a say in our client portfolio. We decide who we sell to, under what conditions, and at what time. And so that makes you think that all of this new talk, it's not necessarily new, but he's bringing it up again about going into Mexico and
Yeah,
fighting the
yeah.
cartels, right? It's not like, it's so transparent sometimes, right? Even if they don't think it is. Like Maduro's a narco terrorist. Let's go in and kidnap him. And actually, we know the deal is, American corporate interests are
Well, he
one.
said that's the thing. Like they say it. Like
Yeah.
then they're also going back and forth in the news reports, like between like, oh, we control Venezuela.
Mhm.
They and also the Washington Post and these like mainstream outfits, they're also way more explicit than even during the Iraq War.
Mm.
Right now, under in the Iraq War, which was really the same reasons, oil
Mhm.
industry for private companies. Again,
Mhm.
that's the main concern. They always use the language of human rights.
Right.
That is out the window for this
Yeah.
administration.
Yeah.
They literally say we're going for the oil. We're
Well,
going
this
to
is the whole
take
thing.
it.
This is our
Yeah,
region, right?
this is they took our
That's what
oil
they say.
because
Yeah, they took our
they
own.
kicked our companies. So it's but the Washington Post, they had an interesting article which I called out on the Substack talking about how they're also going all in on certain aspects. Because even so, the liberal class of these major newspapers are not necessarily completely for this. You
Mhm.
can tell there's some critiques, but their critiques are not the same critiques as you and I have, which is
Yeah.
about just sovereignty and about the fact that we have, to be honest, a sex criminal in
Hmm.
charge,
Oh, absolutely.
leading other criminals of various varieties talking about human rights. So that's one thing. But in the Washington Post, for example, and this is where I saw the quote about Rubio's dad coming from Cuba pre-comp. Like it's a weird like line they just dropped in. So there's an article that is literally, I think in the title it says Rubio, the viceroy or something of Venezuela. Are you familiar with that term, viceroy?
Not really, if you can explain.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's really funny. So the reason why I'm saying viceroy is literally what was called the British governor of India
Mm.
under colonialism.
Hmm.
So the critique, so I read most of the article. So the article was basically giving off the vibes of this is not realistic. This seems like like again, Trump is saying it's not going to cost us any money. So they are saying it's going to cost us money.
Yeah.
But those are their critiques. But it's still crazy to me that throughout the whole article, they don't really mention the British colonialist language they used, and
Right.
they don't even position it as bad.
Right. Right. Of
We've
course not.
gone
Yeah.
beyond. I don't think this article would have existed 15 years ago.
Mm.
I actually think now we're reaching at a point where the forces of revolution and counter-revolution, especially counter-revolution, are becoming so uh, uh, what's the word? Clear and
Hmm.
desperate that we've
Hmm.
entered a new phase. This is
Yeah,
my
I
belief.
agree.
We've entered a new phase because this kind of article, even under the so-called compassionate conservatism of George W. Bush, who was still a bumbling, fumbling monster, he still
Right.
has killed more people than Trump with
Right.
Iraq, right? God forbid something happens like that in Venezuela. But even in that era, in terms of rhetoric, there was still going to be like a level of maybe the government coming in and saying, "Hey, Washington Post," because they talk to each other. Don't
Mhm.
publish that article. I heard that you want to publish using the term viceroy. We know the language will signal something to the people. If we Americans don't know what viceroy is, except maybe for a few of us, like I know because of things I read and my own background, sort of, the Venezuelans know,
Right. Right.
right? They're not
Right.
the rest of the world that is of course, we have colonized populations here, Africans, indigenous, and to some levels, Chicanos and some Asians. But the colonized since Hugo Chavez's ability to win government, he has been rightfully shaping the consciousness of many Venezuelans there.
Yeah.
Even the Venezuelans who are not pro Maduro, many of them hate Mario Machado, and they hate the idea, and they know what's up. So if they heard the term of viceroy, which I'm sure some of them are reading this article through like Spanish translation, they would be up in arms. That is the reason why you had under the George Bush administration at least some semblance of human rights. It's not for us only; it's for them. It's for the Iraqis. That's gone.
Right.
They don't even care anymore. We're coming in. We're gonna do it. And then the Trump thing with what he wants to actually do, it's also very much up in the air. Right? Is there an invading force? We don't even know. One moment he's having the DAA
it doesn't seem to be a real plan behind what's happening.
And he's also now saying there's going to be, I think, tens of billions of money being invested into Venezuela's oil refineries to modernize it. So it's going to cost. I don't care about that. I don't care. I don't even want to begin with that critique. But what I'm saying is there's so many, like, we're in a phase where the ruling class is grappling for answers, and they're grappling with it while also the left wing internationally is not yet strong enough to impose an answer on a section of the ruling class. So I'm not saying the left wing's role is to like get the rational ruling class people, but what I'm saying is, again, look at the corporations involved in Venezuela. That press conference that Trump held, it was clear that some of those corporations were a bit uncomfortable with him.
Yeah.
Right. But they're not getting punished for that.
They're not uncomfortable to the point that they're not going to do the same shit they've always done.
But what I'm saying is exactly that. Is because there's no broad international force yet. Like, there's some countries doing their best, Cuba, to some extent China, but there's no broad force. So as long as that does not exist, bare minimum even, these corporate executives will go with this unabashedly, and I want to add, this is what fascism is. Fascism, this is what it is. Mussolini, Franco, they spoke extremely honest about what they thought about Africans, obviously what they thought about European Jews, obviously what they thought about Roma. I mean, the things they said about Roma people, even to this day, because it's insane. They're like, oh, they're just, they're racially and biologic. The change of scenery of rhetoric went from culture to biology.
Yes.
And we're seeing that happen again now. And Stephen Miller talks about it. Oh, our cities are going to turn into Mogadishu and Port-au-Prince. And
they're online having a damn discussion about turning Africa to Rhodesia again. There was some shining moment. Moment for them. You know what I'm saying? They're like saying like the quiet part out loud, man. But you mentioned something that I wanted to ask you about. As you know, on the left, and when I mean left, I mean for the most part Marxist-Leninist groups and their various forms, right? China is often, there's a lot of debate about, on the left about what China is. And I've seen people on the left have questions on why China did not help Venezuela more.
Right. And I think they were in the country too when the Maduro was taken.
Right. But there's one thing that I think people have to realize too is, as you mentioned in your article, and there's an Al Jazeera article about it as well, that America spends $859 billion on their military, which is more than the 9 below it combined.
Combined, including China, Russia, all these countries. India, which is still big.
When we talk about why aren't certain nations doing it, I think people have to realize that America's power is in its military, right?
Yes.
It's what allows them to go wreak havoc and pave the way for American corporate interests to take over, countries' resources in a neo-colonial type of way, What do you think
Hmm.
about some of the critique that China has gotten, from some people? Again, I'm not talking about liberals, I'm talking about
Right,
some
right.
people,
Hmm.
some Marxists that have critiqued China and say, hey, why didn't you do anything?
No, so you know what's funny? I actually have critiques of China myself. I mean, my main thing is I just hope that the conversation about China, any space, especially on the left, is just normal. That's
Yeah.
my main thing. It's like we can have like for those who call China a social fascist state or whatever that means, I completely ignore that. I think that's wild, you know. But
Yeah.
others who also kind of valorize China to the point where they don't have a real analysis, that to me is also quite dangerous. So for me, I want to say a few things about China in terms of the past too. So I see the Book of Mao there before. My father, was a Maoist. It still is a Maoist. But so Chairman Mao's like domestic policy is very important. Like he saved a lot of like Chinese laborers from a lifetime of just slavery, of like
Hmm.
forced feudal slavery. So, but in terms of foreign policy, as the decades went on, not early on. Early on, he was quite potent in that. Um, China did do a little bit of gamesmanship against the USSR, aligning themselves more so with the US. So, like
Hmm.
for example, I think I mentioned this, but like China sided with Pinochet
Hmm.
because it was a anti-Soviet project because they started to believe that the Soviet Union was somehow their biggest. There was this very authentic but quite now you can say naive but very authentic feeling that the US is done
Yeah.
and that the
Yeah.
Soviets are going to replace them and then the Soviet because it's true like the Soviets and China almost like I think at least 50% of the globe was socialist technically.
Hmm.
So there was that feeling so China began to think to themselves, well, the Soviets are not really our kind of socialism. I say this because China itself, the irony about China's political system and its leadership is that, and this is not a shot at them. I think I would have done some similar things, not the Pinochet part or other
Yeah.
things,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think in terms of like getting some more money investment in because they want to survive what had happened to the Soviet Union, but in the end, they created some tie. The irony is that this Chinese leadership for a long time created close ties with the U.S. So again, this also explains why a lot of countries might be rethinking their alliances with the U.S. because it shows
Mm.
like even China was like saying to the U.S., "We're fine. You can treat us as the not the breadbasket, but as the as the industry for your goods and services, and we'll be chill." That did not change, right? Like
Right.
about how Trump's and Biden's view China. So that's one thing as a warning. So I have criticisms for those reasons. I think China actually made a huge mistake in supporting these efforts, as United States efforts. Even when they were not always supporting the US, they would sometimes form their own Maoist sect, like in Africa,
Hmm.
which would sometimes divide the left
Mm.
further, which was not
Hmm.
great. So I think China actually weirdly should be critiqued for having played a role in this modern world where the
Yeah.
US is now more powerful than it's ever been,
Hmm.
right? Or more craven than it's ever been.
Hmm.
Now, in terms of the modern critique, uh, not only does the United States have that much money in its bag when it comes to like creating, like if there's anything the United States does well, it does a good job of killing people en
Yeah.
masse, right?
Yeah.
Like the mother of
Absolutely.
all bombs, it just drops it,
Yeah.
casually in the middle of
Hmm.
Afghanistan. It has, I think some reports came out that Venezuela, the reason why Venezuela was so caught off guard, it wasn't because they had several moles. It was not that. They had a couple, maybe
Hmm.
one, but it was because there was like frequency weapons. We have to wait and see because some of that is also meant to be propaganda to
Yeah.
scare people. But I wouldn't be surprised if that exists because America does not invest in human care. If
No.
there's anything they invest in, it's Humvees for police who are
Yeah.
crying about soccer moms hitting them.
Tools of
So,
tools
so
of war, man.
exactly. So to your point about that, there is a little bit of that material. Like if you're a Chinese official, you're still on the back end, the defensive foot when it comes to
Mhm.
the overwhelming power of the U.S. And may I add, it's not just like that budget is somehow retained within the US. It's scattered across the 800 plus military bases,
Yeah. Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely. And didn't like that same week America like captured like 2 Russian oil tankers,
Yes,
and
yeah.
nobody did shit about it, right? Because
Nope,
what are
nope.
you
I
gonna
wouldn't
do?
either to some extent. I mean, Russia did set a statement like that's not right, but I was also thinking
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
it was like, not trying to lie. It's just because it's like it's like weird because it's like you're being punked, but you don't know what to do because you're just like nobody like because it's gaslit. It just happened right before and right after the kidnapping of Maduro while China's delegate is there. So it's like if you wake up as a Chinese, some of this is black comedy, black humor, because you're just like it's so dark in the sense of like you're just a Chinese delegate, you just met with the guy. He probably was negotiating for like help, and probably China was part. This is just my sense. Probably China was playing a neutral role between the U.S. and Maduro's government to figure out something he could do.
Yeah.
Right. But he didn't expect this. This is where
Right.
it's, he didn't expect to be kidnapped with his wife. Like,
Right.
if my partner was dragged with me, I would feel horrible. I
Oh
would
yeah.
plead for them to be
As
like,
you
just,
mentioned, they
yeah,
obviously
they
beat
beat
her
her.
to advantages all over.
I think they said somebody had mentioned maybe she even has a broken rib or something.
Wow.
But it's clearly, I mean, you see how they're treating random people here anyway.
Mhm.
But I would be demoralized if I found out my partner was next to me.
Yeah.
I would, not to get too, but I would just be like, no, just freaking take me and that's it.
Mhm.
But China, even with that withstanding, I do understand some people's I just want to say a normal critiques of China.
Yeah.
Normal critiques. The world that we're in, I think China expected a more peaceful handover
Mhm.
of financial power,
Mhm.
but that it was their big mistake for a
Mm.
couple of reasons. One, that is a very non-revolutionary way of
Mhm.
looking at how things change
Mhm.
and how things should go. The United States, see, this is it. The United States is the most craven, but it is weakening.
Mm.
It is weakening, but this is where the Marxist.
In what ways do you think it's weakening?
Oh,
Because
I think, well, Mexico. There are certain things that countries are willing to do, even despite China not being as revolutionary as it should be, willing to stand up to the United States.
Yeah.
And there are certain regional interests, even in the Middle East, where
Mhm.
countries are caught between the masses and caught between their fealty to the U.S. There are certain things that are going to happen and are happening, in terms of like, well, I think maybe you've raised this on your channel, but I've seen it other places too, where they talk about, of course, the mini revolutions that are happening in parts of Africa already, where
Absolutely.
Traore's government and such. They're
Yeah.
not perfect,
Mhm.
but that is weakening. The fact that they kicked out the French, the fact that they're trying to do the thing that, if people are interested, they should check out Atom Getchaway's book.
Mhm.
It is about how Caribbean states, after they were formally independent, and then how some African states, after they were independent in the 50s, how they tried to get federations together.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Right? So that to your question about national sovereignty, you can't even protect your borders if you don't have some alliance either. It's not just
Right.
you against the world. That is at least happening in that part of the globe in Africa too, right?
Absolutely.
Having kicked out the French. So there are some weakening
And
nodes.
it's inspiring a lot
inspiring.
of people.
It is.
Especially people of African descent.
I'm seeing it. I still have to learn more about it, but I'm seeing a lot of discussion about it. I'm seeing a lot of people. When I heard about what they're trying to do as a unit, that
Yeah.
to me was obvious to me that they're quite skilled and politically motivated. It's not just about, we
And
want to
the
kick out the
people love
French.
them. Their people
Mhm.
love them because when
Yes.
at the latest attack on Traore's life, after it was unsuccessful, the people, when they got word, the people just came out and like surrounded his house. It's like nobody's coming in. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? People,
Right.
the people.
And that speaks to the things that have happened through Africa and the subsequent, because people, not us, but there is also a tendency through the media, even media that might be a little bit like sympathetic to Africa, where they treat Africa also as a quote unquote dark continent, like the Conrad Kurtz, that guy
Yeah.
who wrote Heart of Darkness. They're still
Mhm.
like, even though that book was like sympathetic, it still treats Africa as a stagnant,
Yeah, it's racist. I mean,
as
it's
racist, yeah.
sympathetic, but it's racist
Yeah, yeah.
as fuck. Like,
Well, it's perpetually victims, but
yeah.
Africa has been the seat of several revolutions in our
Absolutely.
lifetimes, right? Like,
Absolutely.
like you mentioned, we mentioned Fanon,
Well,
but like,
When we
go
think
ahead.
about Patrice Lumumba, Kwame
Yes.
Nkrumah, Nyeri, so many, right? Like
Right.
Africa has a revolutionary spirit, and I think the fact that a lot of times they face the full weight of the West whenever they attempt to liberate themselves
Right.
from the West is because of how rich the resources are,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Like I saw man, it was an interesting I don't know if it was in an article. I think it was in an article somewhere, but what was very interesting was um someone said that without Africa's minerals, right? And if you just made iPhones here domestically in America, that they would cost $30,000 a phone, right?
Right, right,
Because America doesn't have the shit to make these, right? Like, or
right.
very little of it. One thing about the Maduro kidnapping that I'm pretty sure you read about as well was that the CIA was there 6 months prior, at least six
Oh, I
months
didn't know
prior.
that. No.
Yes, Al Jazeera reported it that the CIA was there prior 6 months before the kidnapping took place. And whenever you look at what's happening in Iran,
Mm,
I really wouldn't be surprised if the CIA is there as well. And I'm not like bigging up Iran's government or anything, and I'm not bigging up the protesters either. But it seems very weird to for a lot of protesters to be begging for quote unquote white man to come in there and take over your nation. Like
well,
I don't like that's some strange shit, man. Even if because look, we're not saying look,
right,
I'm not here to judge anybody else's fucking government anyway, right? I'm here for the self-determination. Obviously, if
right,
there are human rights violations, like we
right,
don't like that shit either. If there is you know, capitalism running rampant in these company and even
yeah,
local companies you know creating wealth disparities with the people, we don't like that shit either, but at the same
right,
time, you know, our initial thing is to respect the sovereignty
right.
of another nation, right? But whenever you see a lot of these, because the media is going to show, you know, 5, 10,000 Iranian protesters protesting their government, and they're going to say, hey, this means, like, even liberal media will say it, hey, this, you know, so if something happens, because there were reports today that
Yeah,
something might happen tomorrow, right? And
really.
so,
Okay.
yeah. And so, with that said, though, whenever you see, you know, those protesters, um, also knowing that there's a possibility that the CIA is over there, as well as some Israeli intelligence over there. Like, how do you assess that whole situation? What's
Oh, I don't.
happening, man? Because it's
It's
a lot.
simple.
It's like
It's
so
simple for,
weird.
yeah, yeah, it's simple for me in one way, which
Uh-huh.
is Syria, right? Look at
Hmm.
what happened to Syria. So again, so a couple of things. I do think it's fine. I know what you mean. I do think it's fine to judge governments because even in an international community, there's going to be some level of territorial border just for administration. People should critique, but
Yeah.
I think the danger is decontextualizing everything
Hmm.
and forgetting the fact that the CIA has been meddling in Iran for a really long time, and also the sanctions have been creating these sort of problems in that country. Like again, the Maduro government, the Venezuelan government, uh, the Bolivarian Revolution, very different from
Hmm.
Iran. Like the Bolivarian Revolution is itself a
Hmm.
very good thing, exceptional thing. The Iranian government is way more complex, just
Yeah.
because when the changeover did happen from the Shah, there was left-wing communist movements part of it, and they were eventually slaughtered. So it was not like the same thing within. Like there is some repression of the communists here and there within Venezuela, but it's far more complex than
Hmm.
what happened in Iran. But that being said, Iran also, I just want to add, they do have elections. It's not completely free, but there's a certain section of the parliament, I believe.
There's a parliament, right? And then
There's a section of the
mhm.
parliament that exists. Yeah. So I know there's so many things to say because America, this is, first of all, we can say this. Any claim by the United States about freedom is bullshit. That's
Yeah.
first of all, because we literally like if you just compare Iran to Saudi Arabia, our
Right.
other ally in the region, they don't even have a parliament. They
Right.
just have a couple of old men
Right.
who make a lot of money by
Rich old
preserving,
man.
yeah,
Yeah.
rich old men who the House of Saud, really weird, and they just love to invade Yemen again and again. Like even today when I'm watching Al Jazeera, I was like, I can't keep track. Like the Houthis had lost power, but now they're trying to fight back. And there was like a little like line that was dropped, just like with the Rubio father line, where they're like, the Saudis are hoping to shape the government there. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like this is so on the nose. But anyway, so it's bullshit. That's the first thing we should always say. It's bullshit. And all this is happening not without US intervention anyway through the sanctions.
Yes.
Now, in terms of the other assessment, Syria. So I want to say, so again, compared to the Iranian regime, Syria's regime is also more complicated because Assad is just one family, not really a good thing. And he was not really a good leader. Like he was trained to be a dentist, I believe. He is a spoiled brat. And if you look at the history of his regime, he was actually feted and he was actually like praised by the Western media for a hot second. It was like the new cool because I think his wife was also like quote unquote Western or something. So it was like this new cool. So I want to say this was not an anti-imperialist regime necessarily, but in terms of actual like what's the word? The actual functioning of how that regime was, at the bare minimum, it did not allow Israel to invade further into its own territory. And currently, right now, I don't know if you know this, but like Aleppo, which is more in the north, to the west, like on the coast. Wait, no, well, it's more than the north. Aleppo was a city that was, I believe, the so-called rebel held, but the Kurdish forces are there. I forgot what they're called. Something democratic forces, right? Now they're fighting. So the Kurds, who have sometimes been rather progressive, they were the ones fighting both Assad, then the ISIS by themselves. Then they fought off the Turks, the Turkish who hate the Kurds, and now they've been left hung to dry by this so-called U.S. administration because now Syria's regime is trying to take over. And I want to add, who is behind the Syria regime? Like all these human rights. The guy who's leading the Syrian regime was on a wanted poster by the CIA only like a couple of years ago, right? He was part of the Al Qaeda wing in Syria. So all I'm saying is that with Iran, as much as Iran is different from Syria, there's one thing that's quite understandable why some of us are quite hesitant with the protests is because I do believe if Iran falls in the context it's falling, and especially if Trump intervenes, because he constantly is threatening to do that, I do think he will, actually, because he is completely unhinged.
I think he will intervene in Iran way faster than he'll try anything with Cuba.
I was going to say that. That's exactly what I believe. I think he's going to do, there's nothing else to say. I think he's going to do that with Iran. And I think if they manage to take over or they manage to create because I think some of the protesters you're talking about are monarchists. Some of them want the Shah back, which is ridiculous. So I think in the end, even if Iran, no matter how much Iran changes through the intervention, all we know is that it's going to be Syria on one important level. It's going to be less resistant to U.S. interests in that region. Just like, because right now Syria is more focused on fighting the Kurds than defending its borders against the Israelis who are backed by the U.S.
That's an excellent point because, and I think a lot of people may not understand that one of the ideological foundations of Zionism is Israeli expansion.
Oh yeah, greater
and
Israel.
They have goals to take over that region the same way America has goals to, like, there's literally like a meme. I don't know which government account posted it, but it said there's a picture of Trump, and I guess he's standing on a globe or something, and it said our region, right?
Right. Oh, I see. Yes.
Yeah, and so, but yeah, Israel is wanting to be the same way, right? People think that it's just centralized in what's happening in Gaza. But they have plans, like they even, a lot of they even talked about going into Argentina and Africa. You know what I'm saying?
Well, Israel is the child of European colonialism. I think Theodore Herzl, who is one of the godfathers of modern Zionism, and I want to add,
he's also an atheist.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Yeah, I didn't even know that. Yeah. So. But this goes also want to add one thing about, the fact is like Zionism, just like Hindutva, because I'm Hindu, and Hindutva is like a version of Zionism for India. These things like Zionism and Hindutva, they are rather new phenomena versus the actual real, rather like, what's the word? Praiseworthy and awesome history of Judaism and in some aspects Hinduism. I have more critiques of Hinduism, but there are some, like, I want to raise that point because there's also this narrative by the Zionists that this story about Judaism or about these ideas are somehow old, but they're not. A lot of Jews in Europe were against Herzl because they also said to him, hey, you are also kind of conflating this idea that we are a race of people And you're also suggesting
They're
we
saying
don't.
that now, though.
Yeah, but they're all, and that's fascism. But you're also suggesting like we don't belong in Europe though either.
Yeah.
So a lot of Jews from when Herzl began his, and again, Herzl did not begin with the masses of Jews because many of them were socialist, at bare minimum,
Yeah, I
left
was looking up
populist.
last week. It was I was looking at some older communist
Right.
early groups from back in the day.
Yeah, they didn't. He didn't start with the masses. He started with Christian elites and other Jews who have maybe some more connections. But he started with the colonialists. The vast majority of Jews who were rather working class or middle class, but many of them were highly educated, bare minimum, and socialist. Like the thing about, like, for example, the very anti. This is the real anti-Semitism. The real anti-Semitic claim of cultural Bolshevism. That whole thing that Jordan Peterson, that crazy guy, does and everything. That is anti-Semitic because for a long time the Nazis would say Bolshevism, which is Lenin's ideology, the danger is it's very similar to how they would critique communists in America, saying, well, those white guys who are communists, what they really want is for your white daughter to date a black guy.
Yeah.
So in the European context, they were saying, oh, if you're not, because egalitarianism, the idea of sharing things kind of sounds good. So in the European context, they're like, no, F that. We're going to say Jews from this random Slavic past is going to come and take over the proper land of German, just like whites here were saying it's going to be black people or Mexicans and, smoking weed. Like weed was a phenomenon because it's going to lead to dating, interracial dating. So I want to add that because Herzl, to your point, he was invested in first situating some Jews who were right wing, essentially, and colonialists in Uganda, I believe, first, and saying, and even I think he said in the letter that we to the British authorities who are colonialists, we share the same thing. We're actually the quote unquote Jews you'd want to work with because at that point anti-Semitism was quite high, and it was because a lot of Jews rightfully were saying things like, we are also an internally oppressed group. And we believe in communism. I mean, Marx, even though his family was forced to convert because his father could not become a lawyer of a certain guild. It was all stupid stuff unless if he was Jewish, so they converted. But he has a Jewish background.
Yeah.
He was well aware about these things. So fast forward to what you're saying, the Zionist cause was first a European cause, a one-to-one. That's their baby. The Europeans created Zionism because Europeans were part of it. And now you see with America since the 60s, now it's a settler colonial project, very much like the Scot-Irish had done to the native population. One interesting thing, though, I want to add to the one-to-one relationship really quickly. In Israel, the dynamics now of what's happening is very similar to the United States in the 1840s, 1850s in this way. So Thomas Jefferson, obviously he was like, I think president in 1805, who gives a shit, but something in that time. He always wanted to, they all wanted to take over native land. All of them. They were all land prospered. But he wanted to do it, not nicely, but he wanted to do it slowly for one reason. Because he wanted to, feel good about himself. That's true, psychologically. And also, he also knew that the native populations were kicking their ass because the indigenous struggle was actually quite strong. The land of
and
people call it
slave rebellions
were weakening the Haiti again. Thomas Jefferson was sweating in his bed after the Haitian Revolution, which is always funny to think about. And there were Haitians coming on, going to New Orleans and doing that
from Barbados to the Carolinas.
It's amazing.
Jamaica to the Carolinas.
It's so badass when you think about the things that certain people were able to do. Like, think about it. You just fucking you fought 3 empires back to back to back. You think you take a time out, right? But you're just wearing this really cool, like, shit, like, like this hats and all that. And you're just like, fuck it. I'm just going to take it off for a day and go on this random journey to this slave continent and be like, I'm going to spread pamphlets everywhere. That is, honestly, it's one of the most badass things about that history. We need that. But the thing is, the fact of the matter is Thomas Jefferson had one other enemy, technically, was the Scot-Irish and the random vigilante Irish ethnic European groups who were like, we can't even wait for the nice stuff. We want to just do it. Yeah. That's what's happened to Israel. Israel had a labor Zionist movement. Again, not giving them credit. This is their doom because they always wanted to expand, to your point. But they fed this other constituency crumbs. Like, okay, you know what? we think you're crazy too. It's like rich Republicans looking down on poor whites, like Mitt Romney supporters versus Trump supporters, right? They're like, oh, you're kind of gross and weird, and we don't like you, but we still kind of need you because we don't want to be with black or brown people. So it's like an unsaid thing, you know. That's what happened in Israel. They were like, oh, you're weird because you are saying things we don't want to hear out loud. You're saying things about the Arabs we don't want to hear. We want to convince ourselves that we are the good people. But you can be the settler colonialist in West Bank. And in Gaza, because people forget there wasn't an Israeli occupying force, even though it's occupying technically today, but on Gazan land in the up till the late 1990s, until they quote unquote left, even though they still constrained. But what I'm saying is now the dogs are off the leash, just like with America planting their seeds with religious fundamentalists in Argentina, Brazil, and also right-wing Islamist groups, right, like in Indonesia and other places. Bin Laden, if you read old reports from the New York Times, they have profiles of Bin Laden saying this young whippersnapper, young man, like, oh, boy, and they have a picture of him with his gun. And it's like from the 1980s because he's killing communists. And then lo and behold, the dog got off the chain. And he started killing so-called his own or whatever. So all this to say is Israel, yes, is an expansionist project because of the European context it came from. But also now America has developed those demons in it. And that's what's going to happen. They're not going to stop. They're going to go for at least a chunk of Syria. And again, to the Iranian question, Syria is, again, busy fighting the Kurds. Even though they still, I think, are having their land taken up by at least some measure of Israeli support for other groups there.
Oh, one thing I want to mention that, it's come up a few times in this conversation, this Christian fundamentalism, this white Christian nationalism. I need people to understand that a lot of this so-called culture war that is promoted by white Christian nationalism has CIA roots in anti-communist and anti-black power movement. It's an anti-communist movement and an anti-black power movement because they saw these things as being a threat to the quote unquote Christian fabric of America. So they can, use other terms and different things under that umbrella, right? But at its foundation, white Christian nationalism is anti-black and anti-socialist, right? And I think a lot of people get fooled by that because you see even not many, I will say, but there are black pastors who rock with that shit now because of, they're incentivized to do so. And that's just one thing that I wanted to throw out. Again, great article.
Thank you.
I want everybody to definitely tap in. It's always a great conversation whenever we link up, and so I definitely keep these going.
Oh yeah, for sure.
For I guess as a closing question, if socialism, anti-imperialism, as you mentioned, climate survival, and global solidarity are inseparable, what does that mean concretely for organizing inside the U.S. right now?
Oh yeah,
because, and just to preface it like this, a lot of people will say, damn, I can't do shit over there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And if you feel powerless, you feel helpless. So if you can, just give the people a word.
Well, all I can say is, first thing, really quickly, is join the groups I mentioned, Black Alliance for Peace. Definitely join them. Check out what they're up to because they have things going on. And in that group, they already have chapters and connections across at least the Caribbean, parts of Latin America. So join groups like that. You can't do anything on your own. And at bare minimum, joining a group means at least you're going to learn from people who have some experience. So, and also DSA, I think at least the DSA, there's a left wing of that group that is part of actually the leadership. So we're in a time of change. So feel free to join those groups. It's a very, I feel really weird saying that because I'm part of the DSA's editorial board. So I'm like a part of the leadership, I guess. But it's still a very white space. So that's why I sometimes hesitate. But then again, if you want to change it, some amount of being part of it is included, and you'll find a lot of very intense anti-imperialist actually. The international committee that's part of DSA, the National International Board, is very anti-imperialist and take a lot of great stances about China and other things. The other thing is also, if you are if you have a union, if you have a union, make sure what you do as a union is international.
Yeah.
Right? Make sure that if there's a strike going on, it depends on your industry. Like I'm a academic, so it's not like our striking condition. It's not like technically the university is not just going to flee; they still need
Yeah.
to be here. But there's some cases of like car manufacturing or cheaper goods being made
Yeah.
where they've literally like just said "F you."
Hmm.
Oh, this is actually to your first question. The other thing about U.S. empire that's bad, capitalism then can leave anywhere it wants. So
Yeah.
capitalism can go to Mexico. In fact, there have been attempts by Mexican unions themselves to work with American unions, saying
Hmm.
we need to do a strike together. It's actually
Yeah.
been sometimes the American side that's been quite confused and hesitant and honestly bullshitty about it. So
Because they don't understand how
they
this
don't understand.
connect.
I also think that's true. And I
Hmm.
also think some of it's also chauvinism. Some of them
Yeah.
do think like, you know what? I'm not Mexican. I don't
Yeah.
care about Mexico because, people still think I'm sure Mexico's not doing that great. Because you watch Netflix, with the orange, view. Like, no, Mexico's doing pretty good, and the
And
United
there are
States is falling.
Americans moving to Mexico to get the hell out of this place.
What's that show, International House Hunters? I
Hmm.
watched that with my partner,
Hmm.
and it's like more like a dream board, like just looking at it, like there's
Yeah.
no way
Yeah.
we can ever go to these places. But
Yeah.
Mexico, you see a lot of episodes the last few years. It's
Hmm.
Mexico, Mexico, Mexico. Like you
Right.
said, people from Cali, people from Canada going
Mm.
to Mexico. And some of it I do get worried about. We've talked about my partner and like we don't want to go someplace where we're actively contributing to
Yeah.
the
Don't
rising
bring
housing
that
level.
American bullshit to
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
where you
exactly.
go.
Exactly. We're here, save
Yeah.
us. And then someone
Yeah.
else loses their house. So we don't want to be part of that. And I do podcasts with you from there, and you just hear someone banging on my door, like, get out of my house. So, so it's like, I'm keeping it really close. Like, no, you can't. I'm just whispering. Like, City, why are you always whispering? Like, no, I'm in a closet because the closet is, revolutionary. But it's like, it's like it is but the episodes show a lot of like things happening in Mexico City. So there's that. But so internationalism materially, if you're part of a union, do as much as you can to link up almost all your efforts when it comes to solidarity with the unions across other places. And then finally, just in terms of even statements, you need to push any group you're in, or join a group and push for the release of Maduro and for him to be sent back. Like simple things like that. Because materially, I know on the immediate sense, it's like, what does it matter to us? It does. If Maduro is allowed to stay in prison indefinitely, and if he and his wife are allowed to just stay there, even if the Chavista movement continues, because it's kind of with Delcy, it's continuing, that is still another precedent.
Hmm.
It's a red line of a red line. That
Yeah.
is crazy to me. And I want to add one thing about Mamdani again. I'm fine with the things he's doing. Like I don't view him as a radical, so that's how I'm approaching it. But the fact of the matter that he called Trump and said he registered his displeasure or disappointment or something, and that was it, is quite upsetting to me that
Mm.
he did not say, "Hey, I am now the mayor of New York City." I don't know exactly all his powers, but I'm sure he can do something. Because
Yeah.
suddenly, whenever certain people don't want to do something, they say they can't do it. But
Yeah.
you're the freaking mayor of New York. So
Yeah.
for the fact that he just
So
said,
what's the point, right?
what's the point? Yeah, why did we? So the fact that he said, I registered my displeasure, it was like a very poetic, formal statement. That is wrong.
Mm.
People also need to push Mamdani. Even if you're not from New York, you need to call his office and say, you need to figure something out about Maduro because he's in New York City. He's in the New
Right.
York area.
Great
You
point.
need to do something. You
That's a great
cannot
point.
just sit back. So that's another material thing. If you feel like you're not part of a group yet, although you should for those reasons, there's plenty of phone banks. You can bring some friends, call his office and say, hey, I'm calling from such and such. I'm not a constituent, but I can say something to you about it. Like the fact is, Mamdani stood for these things. He needs to actually keep himself honest. It is a disgraceful act that all he did was call Trump once. I saw a New York Post headline, and it's New York Post, so who cares? It's like paper meant for sitting on the subway, right?
Mhm.
But the thing is, like, they did say that he calls Trump. I don't know how much of that is propaganda, but he calls Trump quite frequently.
Mm.
That is crazy to me. If that's true, that is a bad sign. And I really, really think people at the bare minimum could call Mamdani's office and say, and voice their disagreement with him and say, Maduro needs to be released. He needs to be released right now with his wife, and they need to be returned to their home. Simple as that.
Wow. Wow. Brother Sudip, again, it's always a dope conversation. Man, I look forward to the next one. And until then, you be well, my friend.
Same to you. Thank you so much.
No problem.